It's the 9th of June 2025, and I just want to raise awareness of a situation that I've been having as a funeral director for about the last 6 months. I've been picking up deceased from sudden death scenarios in residential addresses, which is really unusual. Yeah, and now I worked for the coroner back when I was working for funeral care for 7 years, and my job for the coroner was body recovery and conveying the deceased to the coroner's office, which is inside the hospitals. Now, the way it works is this: whenever there's a sudden death, a coroner is referred to where there's no comorbidities or anything like that. So all of a sudden, I'm getting phone calls to attend sudden deaths, which isn't normal. And when I've complained to the coroner in an email, I've been given the following explanation. And the reason that I'm now attending sudden deaths is the police are now not referring every sudden death to the coroner. And these are people in their 40s and 50s. Um, and the reason being for that is that in September of 2024, there was a new operational guideline procedure issued by the government, and Thames Valley Police have adopted that operational guideline procedure. And that means simply I'm picking people up now off their settees on kitchen floors and under kitchen tables and living room floors and who've just died suddenly. And when I do the arrangement here in the funeral home, their families are saying to me, "Do you know how my mum died?" Because no one knows. No one knows. I've yet to meet a police officer who attends the scene of a sudden death who has a doctorate in pathology and X-ray fucking vision. It's just an impossibility to allow a police officer to make that call. And as one of my colleagues recently said, it's a great time to do a murder because it's unlikely that the coroner's going to have a look. And that's the reality. That's what's going on. So I had an email exchange, and I've going to forward that email exchange to you and for you to have a look through. Hi, guys. It's the 13th of June, 2025, and I'm going to read an email I sent to the local coroner on the 22nd of May, 2025. And this was sent after me attending yet another sudden death in a residential address that wasn't referred to the coroner. There have probably been about half a dozen, I'm guessing, since the tail end of last year. And this is something that never ever used to happen, but it's happening now on a regular basis. So I wrote an email of complaint to the coroner. It reads, "Hi guys, I email you all because I included the police and the coroner in the email, so that we are all singing off the same hymn sheet as I have an issue that I need to get resolved that keeps happening. Last night, yet again, we were called out to what transpired to be a sudden death at a Milton Keynes residential address at around 2 a.m. in the morning by a family who had lost a loved one suddenly. That address was, and I give the address. We were initially unaware it was a sudden death at all until we arrived on the scene and spoke with the family. When we arrived on the scene, the deceased was laying on the floor, having died suddenly with no pre existing condition or history of any. Medical team had attended after the deceased said that they felt unwell, and 999 was dialed. A team of 6 people, believed to be paramedics, were in attendance, who then worked on her for over an hour before she then went suddenly into cardiac arrest and subsequently passed away. The police attended but did not refer to the coroner, and the family were instructed to call a funeral director and left with a sudden death report, which is self explanatory. We were given the copy of that sudden death report by the family, written out by PC 1300 Anna Castrian, who attended. We then conveyed the deceased to our funeral home. Now, the clue to the issue I have here is actually written in bold black ink across the top of the police report, and it reads Sudden Death Report, signed by this police officer. The first issue is that half of this report is not even filled in correctly. Um, and that is it's an admitted sudden death. Why is it not filled in properly, firstly? There are also no supervisor signatures in the boxes that are required on that report. There's no reference to the body being bagged or why it wasn't. It's half filled out. and doesn't do this deceased their due respect. And the deceased was also left in a pitiable state on the floor with clothes torn open, not even dressed or covered up. You know, that's unforgivable. The report also clearly says a large N on the deceased not being escorted to the mortuary, as should have happened with a sudden, unexpected death. Police officers always used to escort a deceased to the coroner's office. I used to do the job for myself many years for the coroner in Northampton, so I know that should have happened because it's evidence, potentially criminal evidence. Now, the second issue is, why do you not already have this deceased in your care, in honesty? Why was there no police referral from the scene of the death for an obvious sudden and unexpected death, where a sudden death report has been half filled out? Uh, um, this is not the first time this has happened. In fact, this is becoming a fairly regular occurrence in the last few months. And where I'm called to attend what transpires to be a sudden death after being authorized by the professional medical people in attendance of that sudden death to do so to the family. So basically, they're telling the families that they can instruct a funeral director at the scene of a sudden death. Then today, I received an email from the coroner, which I half expected, asking to collect the deceased from me, closely followed by a phone call from the local funeral home, contracted to the coroner to do so. Um, why is it I am being intermittently used to collect and acknowledge sudden death that should be collected by the coroner's contracted team? Why are sudden deaths now not being referred as a matter of course to the coroner and the time of death at the time of death, as they should be? Is the decision not to refer being made by the attending police officers? I've picked up other people from the floors of residential's addresses over the last few months who simply should have been referred to you and collected by the contracted funeral directors. And I have had to raise concerns to get them looked at. What has changed? I spent 7 years working for the Northants coroner on deceased recovery, and I'm fully conversant in the process. An established due process is followed to eliminate any evidence being tampered with or destroyed or contaminated, as you are aware. No sudden death should ever not be seen by a coroner, if only to catalogue the injuries or cause of that sudden unexpected death. A sudden and unexpected death is a sudden death, where a perfectly well person dies suddenly and unexpectedly, as a sudden death report attached to this email, filled out by your police officer, Hannah, states. And as such, it should always be invested by the coroner, where there are no previous comorbidities. And I've yet to meet a single police officer with x ray vision and a doctorate in pathology that is able to determine the cause of death in a deceased at the scene of a death to be able to make the decision not to refer. The coroner's team are then not being called out to attend and conveyed to the coroner's office. And that clearly tells me that something is very wrong somewhere, because it is happening sporadically but consistently where it never used to do so with sudden deaths. The fact the coroner now wishes to take a look at this deceased tells me that I am totally right, and that this death should indeed potentially be perhaps a medical mistake, because this person was alive and conscious before the paramedics arrived. So it could be malfeasance or a murder or simply a heart attack, but none of us actually know. So why are these sudden death referrals now not always being done? Clearly, there has been a change in somebody's policy surrounding sudden deaths that is causing this issue. I suspect very much it is the police being told not to refer now where they feel they can do so. Why is that? Are these officers now trained in pathology? Is it perhaps the local funeral home that is contracted to the coroner simply not wishing to attend an early morning call out, which I very much doubt, because I know them and I know them to be professionals? Or is it a new directive coming from yourselves not to refer these sudden deaths, which again, I very much doubt, suspect. I don't think that you would do that. I really don't know why these decisions are being made by police. Is it due to perhaps there being a large increase in the numbers of sudden deaths? So some are now slipping through the net due to an increase in volume, perhaps. But a long and well established due process is clearly failing intermittently, and it never used to. And I know it shouldn't be happening at all, ever. Lastly, you will appreciate there is time, cost, and inconvenience to me as an undertaker picking these people up. As you want to be very aware, I'm one of the people who cares very much about other people, especially bereaved and their families. No one cares more than me about them, and I always want to help people wherever I can. But as you will appreciate, there is a cost involved for every removal we undertake, especially out of hours. I have no contract or agreement with the coroner, and as such, you won't be paying me as you would HW Masons, who is the local company, to attend, or indeed to do a daytime collection from me of this deceased. And I've attended a number of them now. As with any funeral business, it's very easy for all of us to factor in a daytime transfer of a deceased, but not so for the 2 a.m. collection from a residential address when there's been a sudden death that I've yet again undertaken. It disturbs my sleep and my staff's sleep. It costs me time, money, and wages, and that have to be paid for all those attend with me to retrieve that deceased. Only then to have to collect that same deceased a second time from yourselves at the hospital when you have a contracted team in place that should be attending these coroners removals, these sudden death removals, but only if the referral is made. Now, I don't blame you, but something is failing in the chain. And to me, it points to the police officer in attendance, no doubt to be glossed over as a training issue. But next time I'm called out to a removal that ends up being a coroner's removal they do not attend, I will be forced to invoice you because I want the coroner to look at these people without me having to write emails. Um, how many of these poor people slip through the net, are perhaps never referred at all, and are just getting waved through the funeral process now? Why is this only happening in recent months? And I've done 18 years now. I suspect it is down to a police policy change somewhere on sudden deaths, which is frankly badly letting people down. And no doubt the response will be on my complaint that lessons have been learned and mistakes were made, and we'll incorporate them into future training from the police. Can you please, at the very least, speak to Thames Valley police officers and tell them to always refer to you when attending the scene of a sudden death, and especially if they're writing out a sudden death report, which we were given. And ideally, then fill that report in fully, or I will be forced to invoice you for the very next removal I do then to ask that you then ask to take him for a post-mortem. I do not think I'm being unreasonable in any shape or form conveying these concerns to you, and I'll write this email to you, not only in the interest of due process and potential evidence and preservation for your investigations, but also for the families being failed here who go through the pain of knowing their loved ones have not only suddenly died, and have been left in a disgraceful state, but are then also being shipped around. I also do not want to keep getting called out to sudden deaths that should be referred to you and conveyed to you by your contracted undertaker, which again is not an unreasonable expectation, which I know Masons would agree, and they are paid to do so while I'm not. Now, I have to speak to an already upset family who we know um, want a very swift funeral, and to inform them it won't be swift at all because now you're involved when you should have had the referral in the referral in the first place. The family also confirmed to me that the two police officers in attendance told them to call their funeral director. So it was down to those police officers that a referral wasn't done to the coroner. And we all know this isn't the first time. Why? I hope you will understand my position, which I feel is perfectly fair and reasonable, and also advise you of my fees if I'm called out again. I'm happy to do them whenever called. So, whenever I'm called to assist you, or if you are struggling to cover them, but I will want paying to do so moving forward. I do not care who it is. I have to invoice, but this bereaved family, I will not invoice this bereaved family for failings within your well established system around sudden deaths that lets them down. I trust you all understand my concerns. And that was sent to the coroner on Thursday, the 22nd of May, 2025, at 12 minutes to 4 p.m. Um, I then received a reply from the coroner, and that reply was sent to me on the 23rd of May at 4:24. Dear John, I acknowledge receipt of your email, and she includes Thames Valley Policing, and on your concerns on the process for initial reports of sudden deaths. The government introduced a new operational guidelines in September of 2024 following the death certification reform. I have attached a link to those guidelines for your information, and it's death certification reform and the introduction of medical examiners.gov.uk. Thames Valley Police have since issued a directive to their officers to meet those guidelines, where it is clearly natural causes and nothing suspicious. The families, when on scene, will be advised to contact their local funeral director. Written notification is passed to the deceased GP and HM coroner for information. Please see below excerpt of the police guidelines. Now, they're talking about where it is clearly natural causes. How the fuck do they know when they come across a body on a living room floor that is natural causes? That's absolute bollocks. They haven't got a degree in pathology. They haven't got X-ray vision. That's why deceased went to a coroner. So the excerpt reads as follow: expected, natural, where the death is not expected and the deceased has not been seen by a medical practitioner in the last 28 days. The circumstances do not indicate that the death is unnatural and suspicious. We're walking into a house, we're seeing a body on the floor. That body has no previous comorbidities. It's died suddenly. How is that not unnatural or suspicious is beyond me. And the rest of the excerpt reads: if the ambulance service are in attendance and they believe the death to be natural causes, although unexpected, it is unlikely the police will be required to attend unless the category of death is one which we must attend. If the police are deployed to an unexpected death, uniformed officers are to attend, including a patrol supervisor who didn't sign the sudden death report, who will make an assessment of the circumstances using something called COPEGS, COPEGS. If there is no evidence to suggest that the death is unnatural or suspicious, officers will complete a Gen 19, GEN 19, and the family, if on scene, will arrange their own funeral director. So, what they're saying is basically, as with any situation, there may be a rare occasion where further investigation by ourselves may result. Usually, when I flag it up and make a fuss, that's when they want to step in. And the deceased having to be redirected to the mortuary until the investigation is complete. I trust this information answers your concerns. However, if you have any further queries, come back to me. Regards, Sonia. I then went back to them and I wrote them an email saying it's pretty obvious why they're bringing in this new operational procedure, and it's to cover up coroner's referrals of sudden deaths. You know, there are sudden deaths. These are professionals that are waving these sudden deaths through. And that came from Milton Keynes coroner. So those are my concerns. You know, there was a time when no way on earth any sudden death would be waved through without someone having a look. It could be a murder. It could be a murder. There's no possible way. Could be a poisoning. It could be malfeasance from the attending paramedics because that person was very much alive and conscious when they were in attendance, but now has died suddenly. Was it something they did wrong? Do you know what the reality is? They ain't never going to know because they're waving them through without a referral. And at the very least, I've been allowed to take that deceased away, that sudden, unexpected death. You know, I could have contaminated with the evidence. You know, why is there this sudden operational procedure from government? And why have the police been instructed to follow those guidelines? You tell me. It's a mystery, but it's all aimed at hiding sudden deaths by not referring to the coroner, so that there appear to be just a normal number being referred and not all of this massive increase in sudden deaths, unexpected deaths. That's the reality. and it's shameful. These people are fucking shameless.